At the Colors of Failure, we believe it's time to normalize conversations about failure in all of its forms. Everything from the moment it happens and its immediate impact to the raw emotions and thoughts we experience while navigating it. Failure is a universal part of life, and by sharing real stories from others, our goal is to shift how we perceive and how we talk about it. Together, let's redefine failure as a stepping stone to growth and resilience. In today's episode, I sit down with Miles Louis Dante, a competitive triathlete and lifetime endurance athlete, to talk about his experiences with failure and resilience in his life, his training, and his racing. Here's a little bit about Miles. He grew up outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and fell in love with running and started taking endurance sports seriously. First rowing for St. John's High School, and then collegiately at the University of Chicago. Miles raced multiple times at the head of the Charles and Dad Vales regattas before continuing on to row at Lincoln Park Boat Club in Chicago, Illinois. He became a dad in 2016 and again picked up running as an outlet for those early childhood years, adding the swimming and the biking shortly thereafter. He's been training and racing with Team Brightside since 2019. Team Brightside is a nonprofit dedicated to raising funds to eradicate pediatric blood disorders. He has completed 10 70.3s, including 2 world championships, 4 26.2-mile races, and countless 13.1-mile races in his career. He currently lives outside of Chicago with his wife, his daughter, and his beagle. In his downtime, he can be found cooking, listening to music, reading, or raising a ruckus with his family. He can be found at MilesB2009 on Instagram. Miles, I appreciate getting to sit down with you and talk. We have known each other, for now, since 2010, 2009.
Over a decade?
Right? Well,
15 years, something like that? Yeah.
A decade plus. And, we obviously, we met through the Lincoln Park Boat Club. We rode together. We won together and, rocked it together in the 4 in the double. It's been super cool to and inspiring to see and hear about what you have done since then, because you've gone far, man. And I'm super excited to be able to talk with you about it. Be super curious to know more about your experiences there and what you've gone through. Yeah, in rowing we get about 20 minutes of pure pain. In doing an Ironman, it's I'm gonna bet much longer.
We got hours. We got going on hours.
Yeah.
So I think
I think that I'll be really interested to know about that. But what I'd like to do, so Miles, let's kind of take a minute. I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself. So Miles, what I want to know is tell us your story. Start at the beginning and wherever that might be and whatever you think. I'll be curious to know more just about you and your story.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And again, thanks for the opportunity to be on the podcast. I think, I think part of life is learning from other people and their failures and their successes. And I always, whether I believe it or not, I always say I learn more from my failures than my successes. So having this platform to talk about it is cool. But right now I consider myself in kind of 3 phases. I'm a dad. I'm an endurance athlete, and I'm a dude that gets stuff done. And kind of that getting stuff done has been a mentality that I've had since early days. I think I grew up in suburban house that's a little outside of Boston in New England. So there was, working upper middle working class. We had things we had a nice home over our head, but it was always we knew my family installed in me, you needed to work. If you got an 92 on your math test, it's okay, what happened to the other 8 points? How can you improve? So that attitude of working hard, whether you failed or did, were successful, there's always room for improvement. So that was instilled in me at a very young age. And when I came into the endurance sports world through rowing, actually, I started rowing when I was in high school, probably like when most of like the people that start rowing around that time. It was it was because of a challenge and someone that like thought I would fail. So I had played soccer freshman year of high school. We had rowing was like a spring fall sport in my school. And so I was looking for something to do in the spring, and someone said, oh, you're thinking about rowing, Miles? Like, you would never make it through Hell Week, which is like the week of tryouts where they try and winnow down like the 800, because there's a no-cuts varsity sport. Sure. They try to winnow down the 80 kids down to 16, 30, whatever it is to fill a couple boats. And the guy's like, there's no way you can make it through Hell Week, dude. Like, don't even try. And I was like, F you. I'm going to make it. So like that kind of challenge of overcoming failure, perceived failure, people setting me up to fail, was something that I think it like drove me for a long, long time. I've had like that relationship and that kind of like ethos has evolved a little bit, but yeah, from the time I made it through that first Hell Week. I rode freshman year. I actually got cut fall of sophomore year, which again, like when I talk failures, like that was one.
So you made it.
I was on the team, and then like got cut in the fall, came back again in the spring. But yeah, I think that was like, when you asked me to be on this podcast, I was like thinking about like times of failure. That was probably like one of the first setback failures that like really caused me to like, not just, I think some people when faced with failure, like, oh, this is not for me. Like maybe I wasn't meant to be a rower, but I was so angry isn't the right word, but like motivated or like willing to try and prove something to myself. I was like, okay, if I'm not gonna row, I'm gonna like show up and like, because I'm the best possible shape and best, like I've done the work. So that was like I didn't have the note and sticky notes on my mirror every day when I woke up in the morning, but like that was like a driving force for me, like through the fall, through the spring, and then when I came back and ultimately ended up making it in the team. But yeah, I think that's like, we can go into rowing because I think that's been a core part of my life. It's like how I selected where I wanted to go to college. I met my wife freshman year rowing in college. We've been to get like,
funny how that happens, right? Rowing kind of pushes you to where it wants you to go.
Yeah, right. It's been like a through, like it's how we know each other. It's like how we still know each other, right? Like, I don't think we've all rowed together in over 10 years, right?
But there's an alumni boat.
We really do. But like we still talk every single day, and I still like, those are my deepest friends and memories I have. It's like rowing in high school, rowing in college, rowing after college. But yeah, I think that was I came to University of Chicago is where I got my undergraduate degree from, and I came there.
What was your degree in, Miles?
English. So some more failure we can probably pack into, because that was not what I entered University of Chicago thinking I would major in, and that was not what I even thought I wanted to major in. Like after my first year of studies there, I was convinced I wanted to be an econ major, because that's what you do in Chicago. There's no such thing as a free lunch and all the Nobel Prize laureates, right? But yeah, I think I think some of the other like failure stuff, and I think this was actually like another big pivotal moment, was like I rowed in high school, made the varsity team, and then junior year, New England's NEIRA is like the interscholastic like high school rowing competition. My boat, my 8 won its race, so like we were the champs in like the third boat level in high school, and then my team won the overall team championship, which had never been done before. It hadn't been done in like a very, very long time. So for like a program that was as competitive and as esteemed as like St. John's was, like to do that all together, I was like, this is awesome, this is great, let me take this into senior year. And then I like end of my senior year is like sitting in the same boat. I'd already gotten into Chicago. I already knew where I was going. I knew I wanted to row there. And at that point, I think, kind of just like assessing where I was at, I was like, I know I'm going to like Chicago's going to be tough. Like, I'm going to need to like focus more on like academic, and it's going to be different living alone in a city by myself, away from my, my parents, not living in my parents' house or even like, with them down the street. So it's like, okay, like it feels like I can take my last competitive race rowing in New England my senior year, win again, go out on a high note, and then I can just row because like I love doing it, right? Because I like enjoy it, and it's like part of my identity. Life did not have that in for me. So Christ, I didn't even remember if we medaled. I don't know if it matters. Like, we did not win our race. We made it to finals, did not win. We did not win. We did not win champion. Like, we did basically like underperform from what we knew our capabilities were. Which sucks, and it's still thinking about it. Like, it's still like a tight chest. It's tough. But like, I remember it was me and a couple other seniors in that boat, and then we had actually like some under like junior, like sophomores and juniors in that boat. But I just remember getting back, and then like everyone was just like staring dead eye. Like, it was just like a truck had like all hit us, and we were just like, look, like our lights flashing before our eyes. And like I could see it in like.
Is that what it felt like for you?
I mean, it was not even in the realm of anything we comprehended or like thought was even a possibility. We're like, of course we're good. Like, we did this last year. Of course, like, we're stronger and better. We trained harder. And like, we rode together even more. Like, of course we're going to do the same, if not better. Yeah. So it was like one of these gut punches where you're just sitting there going like you like could not move, like, and like you're picking up the boat and bringing it to the boathouse. Like there's people chatting, talking, like dead silence. You could hear like a pin drop. And like, I remember two things. Like, one, this is my buddy CJ. We're in the same boats both when we won as a junior and like one as a senior. But I remember like us both just looking at each other like, is this it? Like, is this gonna end? So, like, remember that, like, us just going like, I can't believe it. Yeah. And then I remember some of the younger classmen, like, he'll probably be fine with me telling the story, but like, his name is Austin. But Austin was like real super smart, super strong rower. His brother was in the same class as me, so like I knew him even before he joined the team. But I remember him going up, and he's like, we're gonna fix this. We're gonna make things right next year. And I was like, thank you. I don't know. Like, I really, like, I don't know how. Like, I'm not gonna be here. I'm not gonna be around. Yeah. Like I was just like, I was like, I hope you don't have to feel this at any point in your rowing career. I don't actually know that he did, because like he was they kicked ass for quite some time after that. Like, my part played a little, but like that moment and that like, oh my God, I failed, right? Like, 'cause like I had this I had this ambition, like I had this thing I actually already did. Was this moment where like all of a sudden I had been entering the summer into my senior year, like, yeah, I'll kind of like coast off and then go to college and do whatever college kids do. And I was like, well, fuck. I now need to go avenge this. So that gave me this whole new competitive fire of like, no, I need to be the best and the fastest, and I need to be the first, and placing all these like really, really high expectations on myself, so that I never felt that failure, ever felt that feeling, that gut punch, that like dead eye, like stunned feeling ever again.
So with this, because I hear like that. What he said, like that message of like what you were given, okay, growing up, right? If you got 92, where'd the other 8% go? And I guess I'm thinking about that, but I'm also like really curious about, as a rower, like what happened during the race, right? So it sounds like you were in an 8, probably a 2K. But yeah. So like, would you mind sharing about like what you remember from that? I know it was probably nearly 20 years ago. But...
I think actually, it's 20, like I graduated from high school 20 years ago this year.
Yeah. Scary, right?
Yeah, which is, God, I feel old.
Yeah.
Hopefully I don't look it. Yeah, I think you're probably the first one asking me to like think about this in quite some time.
Good. I'm glad.
But yeah, I think like I don't know. We got like this start. We had a decent start, right? Like, we got off the line. We were, top 3. Like, again, we're highly seeded, so like, in rowing, the higher seeded boats get in the middle, so they have more what they can see. If you're on like one end or the other, you can't necessarily see the rest of the boat. Like, there's 6 boats in the field.
Worcester, where like
Lake Quinsigamond in Worcester.
Okay.
So I think actually like our start line, it was a 1500 meter race for high school boys. So actually like the 1500 meter wasn't under the 290 bridge where you see like collegiates like IRAs go. It's actually like right outside our boathouse, which is like pretty sweet. Like everyone else had to like row down, and we're like, oh, we just literally have to like paddle out and about.
Easy.
But yeah, but like we're somewhere in the middle, 3 lanes. We get out to a start. I don't know. We're in it. We're not like, we don't jump out to like a huge lead, but we're like, okay, we feel comfortable. Like, we're where we are. Do the settle to our race face. We're sitting there like we're kind of like neck and neck. And at some point, I remember. So the last year in like the similar race, like our Jake the Snake, our coxswain, when I was a junior in this race, like he basically called.
If he listens, he'll know that was me.
Yeah, he's out in Chicago. He's out in Chicago, so I'm definitely gonna send this to him once it's done. But he basically typically in a race, like you've got your sprint, you'll kind of like call up the rating and the power to kind of bring you ahead.
Yeah.
He called it way fucking earlier than he had planned. Like, 'cause he just looked at it as like, guys, it's time to fucking go. And like, even as I say what I remember him saying, like, it's the shit, like full body chills. 'Cause like we did that, we stomped. So same position next year, different coxswain, slightly different crew. He's like, all right, we're like, he basically like, the plan was to like do a little like, up of 4 or 5 beats, get a little bit of length, and then like stomp on it in the sprint. Called it up, and like we didn't move. Like nothing. Like we might have lost this half a seat or a seat, but like we didn't move. And like last year, like we jumped. It was like a half a boat length and like 20 strokes. So I think at that point we're all like, what? Like the little seed of doubt is like suddenly like that little shoot is out of the soil. We're like, no, we're like, okay, we're still good. Like we're good. We'll figure this out. We'll catch him this right. Like we're strong. So we get to the next 500, next 500. We're somewhere in like the 750 to 500 meter, and like start to call. It's like, okay, we got to like pick it up this time. It's go time. It's sprint time. We got a minute and change left to go. So we kept pouring on the power, kept jacking the rate, and we're just not going anywhere. And like I think at this point where we started the sprint, like they might have been St. Paul's or Exeter, one of the two of them. Like they had gained a couple seats, so I don't know where I was sitting, but like I could, when you're rowing, even though you're looking ahead of you, you can sense where like the other boats around you. You're like, I know they're at least like a half length ahead. We got to catch up to them. Like I want to see like stern deck somewhere out of the corner of my eye, and like that. You could just see more puddles and more white space going this way. I'm like, we're not fucking moving. Why aren't we moving? Why aren't we moving? And I think like it was like, no, we got like jack the ray more, jack like keep trying to. We threw the entire kitchen sink at it. And just crossed the finish line like spent, exhausted, dead, and like we didn't do the thing that we knew we could do, that we were capable of doing, and thought we could do. So someone's hooting and hollering, and like we're all exhausted, but like
you remember what position you guys finished in?
I could not tell you. I feel like it might have been a 3rd place. I don't know. I'm the type of person, like I finish a race.
Yeah, first.
Not even that. Like the races I have won, right? Like if you're like college coach, rowing coach of mine said, like if you're resting on your laurels, like you got them in the wrong place. So there's literally a box that my parents have at their place still that has all of the things I've ever won, medals, banners, whatever, and they're just sitting there because I was like, I don't need to look at it. I feel like it was 3rd, but we couldn't we couldn't show anyone like how exhausted and how spent we were, because like the program wrote for us like, no, you like it's you don't be flailing around and being dramatic at how tired you are. Like everybody knows, like you don't have to show it off. Like we're all like done, and we just have to like use whatever we have left just to like hold on to our oar, slowly paddle around. But yeah, just that like, yeah, the biggest memory I have is just like sitting in that lane and like not like trying to go somewhere and just knowing like things are going, and like there's not like you like, I don't know, with the retrospect is like I was doing all I can, and I should be like accept that was what's happened, but like just being so fucking like, what do you mean we're not doing it? What do you mean we're not moving? What like what the this is not in the realm of possibility. So yeah, that was again one of a couple like I think key failures that like propelled me on to like a different stage of my life and a different perspective of like the way I think about things, the way I treat myself, treat others, prioritize things in my life. But yeah, that like was not a great way to end your senior year.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, Miles, I really appreciate that you share that. I mean, and so like for anyone who's going to listen and you're not familiar with rowing, right? I don't know. We're in high school. Were you rowing the 1,500 meters, or did you do the 2K? Okay,
we did two. I think 2Ks were like Henley, which I never rowed at.
Okay, yeah. So I grew up in Madison in Wisconsin, and so we would train for the 2Ks, but whether it's 2K, 1,500 meters, even 1,000 meters, what Miles is talking about here. Like this is all happening in the course of like 6.5 minutes. So we're not talking a super long amount of time, yet this, Miles, I hear from you, like this is a really impactful experience and something that has left a lasting impression on like what it means to compete and what it means to maybe like how you approach competition. Now, like, and I think, right, and this is me, obviously I grew up in high school rowing, and I think this is probably true for a lot of high school athletes. We all probably have that like experience where like, oh man, this just changed it for me. Right. Like as you were sharing that, I was thinking about, I think I was a senior, right? And we had a pretty good, as a junior year, we had a pretty decent year, right? I know, like we had actually sent on a boat or two to the Pan MX, games, and like so that was like a huge thing over the summer. And I remember my coach being like, "Hey, we'd really like you to go," and I'm like, "I'm not sure," and just like but like there was a lot of wrangling. We had a lot of really fast guys. Then I remember like as a senior, our head coach had left. The club had kind of split apart. And then there was a new club, Camp Randall Rowing Club, that had started up on a different lake. And, we were all within like 15 minutes of each other. So a lot like CRF and Lincoln Park.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah. And we had a good group of seniors and juniors and had gotten 2 entries into the head of the Charles. Right. We got an 8. We got a 4. Now we had raced ahead of the Charles. I think I was a sophomore. And like, so if anyone listening really is looking for something fun to do, Sunday, 3rd weekend of October, fly to Boston, watch the junior 8s, the junior men's 8s.
God,
like, some of the best rowing you'll ever see from kids, and some of the worst rowing you'll ever see. 2002, like, so this, I'll share this, Miles. We, 2002, Row 2K put up, they always put pictures of races that they attend, but they put up a section on the Sunday races called the Crash Galleries.
Yes.
I don't know if you have gone through.
Oh yeah. There's some St. John's boat in there.
Yeah. Well, so we Mendota Rowing Club. We had sent an 8 that year, and we were like so psyched. I remember our coach, like after we got back, he always had this big wrench. Like I don't know where he picked it up, but like comedic sized wrench. And he would sometimes like crank on and be like, you got to row fast, and like,
Yep.
So he was like, okay, guys, I remember the kind of the letdown speech at the end. He's like, well, you guys were like top 3 for the first 500 meters in terms of splits. And we're like, oh, that's awesome. He's like, then after that, I don't know what happened. I know what happened. We started the crashes. That's what happened.
Yeah.
Right. And so like,
yeah.
we're banging into this boat. I remember our coxswain, I don't know if it was the Israeli junior national team boat or maybe, something, but she's like yelling at them in Hebrew and like, just like, blah, blah, like all this comedic stuff. And then I think it's the third turn. Instead of turning, we go straight. We just keep going straight. And so we're like full stop.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, for years, right? The year and a half, 2 years that I've been rowing before that, all the guys who are older, right? All the juniors and seniors at that point were like, oh, you get to that Charles, it's like the race, right? And it's, you just got to pour everything into it because it's like 17 minutes and you're done, especially in an 8. It's just like pound, 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 and you go through. And I'm like, here we are being those guys. We're those guys.
Yeah.
And it's like such a, that build up, right? Kind of, Miles, I think what you were talking about, like you won the year prior and you're like, okay, we can do that. We can do that again. Yeah. Senior year, I'll be
run it back, baby.
Yeah. And here we are, like not DFL, but pretty close,
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I lost my technical and I'm like, oh man, that stinks. But yeah. It was, I think so, I appreciate you sharing that because it does bring that up. And it's one of those, it makes you think about all that and kind of maybe what that contributes to just the, the choices that you may make and the decisions. And I guess that kind of, I want to use that as a way to ask because, I've had some people ask like, okay, so, knowing that you rode, knowing that you were like, and I remember, you and me, we would all often go back and forth with our erg splits and seat racing in Chicago, and we were some of the fastest guys. I will say, I was maybe a little bit faster than you.
Don't challenge me. I'm gonna have to pull out the erg and I'll have to go off again.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I still got mine in the garage. Okay, but what I think a lot of people have asked, and what I'm really curious to know, I know you through rowing, but like, what, Miles, was it for you? Maybe it was an experience, or maybe it was like just a time. I don't know, but like, what was it for you that helped you or pushed you, or the decision you made, or push that decision that you made to like take your athleticism to like the next level, right? Like, to go from rowing into like, you know what? Triathletes, like I actually wanted to race and win and like what? So talk about that for me.
Yeah. So that's an interesting story. And I think we keep coming back to like people challenge Miles to do things, and that's a very good way to get Miles to do things. My wife will tell you, if you want me to get something done, tell me I can't.
I don't think you can take out the trash, Miles.
Doing it right now. Here we go. So yeah, very very externally competitively motivated like that. But yeah, I think so essentially I graduated and then friend of mine, again, best friend, he was the best man in my wedding. We lived next door to each other for 3 years during the pandemic. We were like, all right, we're both graduating. We have jobs, but like they don't start really until the fall. So we basically got this entire summer. We need to make sure we don't get like sit around and just get fat and drink beer all the time.
Yeah.
So he said, let's do the Chicago Triathlon. And I ran because running was a part of like cross training and rowing. And I had I ran, I liked running and was like fairly decent-ish at it, although I never did the real endurance type stuff in high school. I knew how to bike and I was like, if I fall out of a boat, I know how to swim. Like, it's fine. So that was like the Chicago Triathlon, summer 2009. I actually have like the race shirt that you get out to finishers hanging up in my office, because that was the first triathlon I ever did. And, like, it was like basically can we do this? Let's figure out how to do this. So ran my own training. I didn't work with a coach on any like swimming. I think I borrowed my dad's bike, which at that point,
I remember we talked about that for a while.
Yeah, like a gorgeous little Trek, like candy red. He bought that bike for him.
Was it on the down tube?
Yeah, you're right. Down tube shifters.
Yep.
Like, he bought that bike for himself before I was born. So, like, the bike is literally as old as I am.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember the run, but like that we finished the race. The swim was absolutely terrifying and horrible, because I realized, like, doing laps in the nice, your nice like Y pool is very different from even like a sheltered harbor when there's like literally thousands of people racing over you. So I finished, like, had a panic attack or 3 on the swim after I kept getting run over by successive people of swimming over me. But still finished the race because I'm very stubborn like that. And at that point, I was like, cool, I did a triathlon. That's it. Never wanted to do any of it. Like, I loved biking and I loved running just as like a way to clear my head. But fast forward like 5 or 6 years later, my beautiful baby daughter is my wife and I are pregnant. My daughter is born. And we're both taking and I was fortunate enough to have a company that let me take some paternity time off. So, you have multiple kids. So, like, you may or may, you probably remember or not remember, like, the first month, like, you're not sleeping. There's a lot of like your lives just start revolving around this human being, and like, you don't care because like that's the most, maybe more important than like the relationship with your wife is. But like so reorienting, shifting everything. But also when you're a newborn, you sleep a lot, like a lot. Like you're taking, and it's like 2-hour naps. And then, my wife was breastfeeding. So like, that's like a physical thing that you have to figure out too. Right. And so there was a lot of, okay, kids up, you take care of the, poop, clean, burp them, fall back asleep. So there ended up being like just like a lot of downtime, I would say. And like I was like, okay, it was great, gets to catch up on sleep. I don't really like sitting around too much for too long. So like I just got back into running. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go out, like, I know I probably have like this hour, it's probably an hour, 2-hour window. Like, let me go for an hour run. Like, let me go do 10K. And then just like really fell back in love with like the aspect of sport that I love about rowing, which is like it is completely physical, like 100% physical and 100% mental at the same time. And like you have this like, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe you'll probably hopefully you kind of like feel it too, but like I'm doing the thing and I'm aware of the thing, but I also have like my consciousness somehow separated from it, and like it's like this like flow state, right? I think is probably the closest thing to describing it. And that like just ritual of like Lacey got my shoes going for like an hour run, 2-hour run in the morning just ended up being like super therapeutic for me. Like I started riding my bike again. But at that point, I think I did like another, like, timeline is fuzzy. I'm not great at like remembering the path, but like important part of the story is like after doing that, like that was 2016. So 2017, same friend of mine, Matt, that I had done the Chicago Triathlon like 8 years, whatever it was before, was like, we should do a 70.3 together. I was like,
there we go.
Let's go. Like who's gonna beat who? Whose name is on the line? Probably mentions it. Like Matt and I rode together.
I think he was on
college. He was on Lincoln Park. He spent less time there than I did. But yeah, this was a guy, like he was on the varsity team when I was a freshman. It's like, hey, you like let's be friends. You lived in my old dorm. Like you're into the same stuff that I'm in. but he's put his mind. It's like, all right, let's put something in mind. Like, let's see who beats who in the Benton Harbor Steelhead 70.3. That was that August of 2017. So this was like a challenge. Like Matt and I, similar to you and I, where I was like, all right, whoever beats who on this next 2K challenge thing, has to do something for another one. I think at one point, we checked loser of the two, who had the slower 2K time had to shave their head. So I had to shave my head. But that was I think I had done 1 or 2 sprint triathlons before that, but this was okay, this is 70.3. This is that's 1.2 mile swim. It's a 56-mile bike ride. And then there's a half marathon after all of that. I have to take this shit seriously. So, my MO was I found a full Ironman training plan off the internet, downloaded it, printed it out, and then looked at it. It was I probably don't necessarily need to run 20-mile run in training. Probably don't need to do a 100-mile bike ride in training, but I'm going to do everything else. I'll do all the swim stuff. So that, I knew I could not just kind of gut it out and splash around and survive. I need someone to come. So I had someone help analyze my swim stroke. I spent some money on a bike built in this century that had somewhat modern components. To figure it out. I was all right, what are the stretching and strength exercises you need to do to run? And then, my daughter is there. So I think this might have actually been the first race she ever went to see me compete at. If there's another one, it probably doesn't matter to me in my own story as much as that one does. But brought the family out to Benton Harbor. Matt's out there too. At least significant other girlfriend they might have been married at that time or very close to being so. But I was okay, Matt's a better swimmer because Matt swam in high school. So it's okay, he's probably gonna beat me out of the water. I think I'm a better cycler than he is, so I might be able to catch him up by then, but then I'll definitely catch him on the run. So memories back of that race, and the swim was gorgeous. It felt strong. You get out of the swim, and T1 is the transition area from the swim to the bike. And then I don't see his bike. And I was we had racks fairly close to each other. And I was shit. Okay, he beat me. I gotta find him. So bad out of hell out of T1, and I'm just full gas because I was I gotta find him. I knew he had because he was Army, so he had some yellow Army camo kit on. So every time I popped up, Benton Harbor's hills was ups and downs and winds, and every time I popped over hills, see Matt, I can't see Matt. No, I can't see him. Okay, he must be around the other hill. So I just kept gunning it on that race.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
Where did you get the energy for that? Right, because you got out. You said T1. At the first transition, you're I don't see him there. Right, and I think you had said something earlier about some people they get to a point where if that didn't go well, they say to themselves, "Hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't for me."
Yeah,
right? But that didn't happen for you. What moved you in that?
Yeah, I think in that moment at that time, it's oh fuck, I have I can't give up now, right? We're not even a third. I think I ended up completing it in 5.5 hours. So I'm 40 minutes into what is going to be 5+ hours of working out. It's I've got all those opportunities. I have to catch him. I have to I kind of knew in the back of my mind he's probably going to get out of the water ahead of me. But the fact that I didn't see the bike at all, I was I gotta go, and I gotta go now. And I think it was I don't know. I didn't want to I didn't want to lose. I did not want, because I knew I was training, or at least I felt I was taking my training a lot more seriously than he was. He was not waking up at 5 a.m. to get a swim in the morning and then doing a run in the evening or doing a bike in the evening, whatever. He was not doing double days.
But you were.
I was, because I was I gotta take this seriously. And so to see that, and I was I can't let all this hard work go to waste. I can't fail now, right? I was I gotta go. And there's a lot of, guys who probably get it. Like there's a lot of like anger, right? That I think like motivating, like, I was angry. Like eventually it ended up being like after that like race in senior year, I was angry that we didn't do better. I was like, I got to take it out on something, and I'm going to take it out on the next person that like rows next to me and like that sits next to me on my team, and I was going to crush him on the 2K. So like, I think there was just like some anger of like, he's ahead of me already. Yeah. No, I have to get like, and again, he's my big brother, right? Like he was my big brother, my fraternity, literally. Love him to pieces. But I was like, fuck, I gotta catch this guy. And so like, there was like a lot of just like anger, like I have to do this right now, and like probably more primal instinct. Again, I don't race like that now. Because again, a lot of shit has changed, but like there was a like I have to like this like fist clenched surging like I have to go now. I have to go now.
Like at that time, do you remember what you were angry at? Like, was it direct or was it just like?
I think it was, yeah. I mean, I was probably angry with I think it was like more angry with myself that I hadn't prepared enough, like hadn't performed as like, I think for me and like throughout my athletic career, I think there's always been this tension. I call him like, it's like I call him Aristotle miles, because like the Aristotelian ideal of like, there's this like,
here's your English mate.
Here's the ideal, right? Like, yeah. Right. But like, there's this like ideal miles is like, okay, here's the one that like throw down a sub 6 minute 2K at 150 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know rowing, that's like
that. Yeah.
It might have happened once. An EPO may or may not have been involved. Yeah. But yeah, this was like ideal miles who like performs at like in peak 99, 100% of his capacity, leaves it all out there, like makes no errors. And I think at that moment, as I'm like getting out of, T1, getting onto my bike, I was like, I am nowhere near that miles. That makes me angry that I haven't pushed myself to get close enough. I have to push myself now. Like I haven't, like, clearly I didn't do the 2-a-day swims was not enough preparation to put me ahead of this guy that swam in high school and has not really competitively swam since. I gotta get back up to there. So I think there was a lot of like, I'm angry with myself that I didn't do better. And I was like, well, I can't go back and train more. I have this bike in front of me. I'm pretty good at biking. I'm fairly confident at jumping, running, biking up hills and taking it like a streaming fancy on the way down. Yeah. So I think in that moment, I was like, I'm angry with myself. I'm going to take it out on everybody else. And there was a lot of fuck you, like muttered, or probably maybe I actually said it out loud. A lot of like passing the guys like, fuck you. The guy passing me back. I was like, no, fuck you. I'm going to pass you again. Yeah. So there's a lot of like, just like, I remember that being a very emotionally like angry, like it's like every ounce I'm just putting into the pedals and like trying to catch Matt. And then, so here's the fun part of the story. I beat him out of the water. Like I was faster out of the water. I just like in my haze of like just swimming, like, cause this is, I think the first time I'd like actually swum 1.2 miles in open water.
Wait,
like
that's a lot.
Like, which is a lot, right? 1900 meters, for those of you that do European units. But like, I just didn't, his bike was like actually on the other side of the rack of mine. And like, I just, in my like fog addled brain, like I just didn't realize that. Mm-hmm. So I raced the entire race, assuming that like I'm trying to catch him at some point. So I think when I got back into T2, I then like connected the dots. It's like, oh, his bike is still like his name. I don't know if they did this at this point. It was like his name, or I knew his number, right? It was like his number on his rack was like, the bike was still gone. I was like, oh, I'm ahead of him.
It's amazing.
I was like, this is fucking great. Yeah. And I was like, and then I think at that point, it's like, okay, I just need to like, let me run the run that I know I'm much more capable of than he is. Mm-hmm. And that'll be good. We'll be good, right? Like, but like that, don't remember too much about the run. But I remember there's been a couple of times like I've like had emotional, not breakdown, but like emotional, like crying at finish line type thing. Yeah. like, I remember like going down like that first finisher shoot and just like sobbing because I was like, holy shit, I did the thing, this really hard thing. I like overcame the thing that I, like at that point, because I knew like I overcame, like I was faster than I was swimming, like I didn't let that hold me back. So like there was just this like, holy shit, I actually fucking did it. Yeah. And then crossed the finish line, and then, which is awesome, great, celebrate with friends, family, see Matt cross the finish line. But I think the most impactful thing is like that I remember from that race is like, it's a couple hours later, we're like sitting out in like one of these like open air bars and overlooking the lake. My wife and his girlfriend, they're both like gone into like probably settle up the tab because both of us are probably many craft beers into it at that point.
Although it probably only took like 2 for you just
right. It might have been like 2, and we're both like drooling on ourselves. But like he reached over, he's like, "I'm really proud of you. Like you're fast, dude." And like I had never, like, he'd said that, like you say, like I tell you, Alex, like, shit, you're fast. But it was just like in the way that he said that, I was like, proud of you, like you got it done, congrats. Was like one of the most meaningful conversations I think I've had with him or other people in my adult life. It's like, I did it. And that scratch the triathlonist that has continued. I keep scratching at and keep training at and training for. 7-8 years later now.
Yeah. I mean, Miles, that's a huge story. It's so cool. Number one, to hear that, and 2, I think it sounds like what you go through during a triathlon, right? Because I've never done one. I know my wife has.
Not yet. Not yet.
Like, oh, maybe we should do one. I'm like, yeah, but swimming. I have boats that go over. And in any case, I just like what you go through, and it sounds like there were opportunities where, and I'm going to bring it back to like this idea of like of failure. Not that you failed at any of those points, but I think that there was a door. It sounds like there was a point where like, sure, there's a door, you could have opened it. You chose not to, though.
Yeah. And
you pushed harder instead. And I think so. Like one of the questions that somebody had put in was like, when you encounter a big obstacle, right? Like, what is it that, whether it's motivation or a cognitive process, an emotional process, maybe, but like, what is it that helps you to push through that obstacle?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's actually weirdly all related to the concept of failure. So like in that that race was like I there's a literal fear of failure that it was driving. It's like I can't fail at something because then I am because then I have failed at something and therefore I am a failure. And even though this is again like this is not my day job. Like again, I talk about myself like I'm a dad. I have a job. I work out. I have other interests and skills outside of working out that I can squeeze in when I can around family and everything else. But like, to me, the concept of like, oh, if you fail at something, you are then a failure. And then that casts this shadow and this like negative cloud was something that, I don't know, in some ways I'm still running from a little bit subconsciously. But like, definitely like, oh, I need to be a fear of failure. So I don't, again, not a pause and not a smart, like long-term coping strategy to be like, oh, I'm afraid of like, I want to call myself this. And, but yeah, I guess now, so what gets me through this strong workout and I had one this morning, like I had some gnarly bike intervals at a much higher watt target than I necessarily wanted to. I'm like, I technically failed on the first one, and then I really failed on the third one. But like, I was like, I can't, at least now, retrospectively, again, like looking back for years, is like, I've now reframed it as like, it's because I miss an interval. It's they like don't 320 watts versus 336 or whatever. Like it doesn't like that doesn't mean I haven't made progress and I haven't learned something about it. So like when there is that, like I got an awful workout scheduled for tomorrow because my coach hates me. But I was like, okay, I'm going to do my best. Like, did I actually try? Like, and did I prepare myself to actually try? Did I actually put in the effort and try to do that? And then, especially because I'm getting older, right? Am I doing the right thing around that to like make sure am I getting enough sleep? Am I recovering right? Am I like staying healthy with my diet and everything? So I think now where, a 15-year-old Miles, a 20-year-old Miles that did his first triathlon, the 27-year-old Miles that did his first 70.3 would have been motivated around like, oh, I got to do it to not like, I can't fail. I have to try because I can't fail. Now I'm like, I just have to try. Like am I going to get there 100% of the time? No, because I am not a robot. If I was, if you succeed at like everything you're doing, you're not getting any close to your potential. Like you are underselling yourself short. So like that part of those like struggle workouts are like, okay, I know this is going to make me stronger in a long term. Like because I missed interval 3 on January 10th, 2025. Does that mean Miles is a failure for the rest of 2025? I was like, no, because I didn't do that. I need to learn things like how do I pick up my cadence? How do I make sure that like is there something else that like I'm doing? And then I don't know, the great part about interval workouts is there's another one. So got that, you got your rest period, you get right back after it. So I think like that's where I've started to like it's tough. It's not impossible. Like I genuinely don't think there's anything impossible to do in this world. I think if people have the right determination, the right resources, the right environment, you can do. I mean, we've done all these things that are completely outstanding.
Now you say that. Are you familiar with Snoop Dogg's Affirmations song?
Oh, I am not.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. We love to play it whenever our kids are kind of like being negative, and so you can find it on YouTube. But part of one of the lyrics is everything is possible. Right. And I forget who says it, one of the singers, but my kids love to be like, Daddy, that's not true. As a human, we can't flap our arms and fly. And, so my wife and I'd be like, yeah, that's
correct.
True. So maybe
you're factually correct.
But I don't, and then we'll respond with, I'm not sure if that's what they're meaning in the song, though.
Yeah.
Right. And
you're like,
yeah, it's a nice, like the naivety of of a child to, take it quite literally. But I think, Miles, to the point of what you're saying is like, yeah, if you try, if you put that effort in and you keep going with it, yeah, not much will stop you to that, other than it. And it does sound like some of the ways that you have coped, like in the first full trial, was it the 70 point? Yeah. Like anger was a driver for you, right? And I think that's a. I don't think it's uncommon, right, for anger to be a motivating factor.
Yeah.
At the same time, it sounds like it kind of pushed you almost, blindly. Like you did not see that, Matt he was behind you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also like anger is not sustainable. So like we were talking about earlier, like the 1500 2K races you do. It's like, again, you're going all out, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 6.5, whatever it is. It's a small enough chunk of time that you can kind of, not to say you can do it entirely on like endorphins and anger and like willpower alone, but like there's a good chunk of that you can do that. you can't be angry with yourself and like keep that fire going for a 5-hour triathlon. Like there's just it is exhausting. Like it's exhausting to like fuel that, to keep fueling that. And like, it's not, you just can't. So I think, and that's probably like long-term life coping strategy. Like, anger can probably get you through some things. So like, oh, I have this like obstacle, like, I don't know, like obstacles in life. Like, oh, I have this boss of mine that keeps riding me and like doesn't understand what I'm doing. And like, maybe the angry, like you can do some like angry, like, I'm going to show her. But like, that's not like a long-term, you can't keep showing up to work and expecting to get that output or any positive output with that. So you got to like, how do you reorient yourself? And at least for me, it's like, do I know that I've actually tried? Like, do I know that I've like actually fully put everything into that race, that workout, that interval? And if I have, or at least I've done, like, honestly, like this is like within the last couple of years, months even, I was like, I know I've like usually gotten close to that. Like, I'm okay with it. Like I think one of the other like failure stories I wanted to talk about was around the pandemic in 2020. I took on a project called SSS 70.3. There was a hashtag for it because I was working for Twitter at the time. So basically what that was a self-supplied, self-sufficient 70.3 race that I and my coach had me train for that year. So obviously no one was going outside. Like, I don't know. There was a very real, like, are we going to be alive in a couple months? Kind of dread hanging over everyone. Which we all got through. But I know I had started working with my current coach, Nick Ruley, as part of Team Brightside. So Team Brightside is a charitable organization raising funds for pediatric cancer research. Like, incredible organization. They've raised thousands and thousands of dollars and trained hundreds of athletes to do the Chicago Triathlon and races around the world. So I had trained and done the Chicago Triathlon with them in 2019. Got introduced them through a friend. Nick was great. The race was awesome. And at that point, this is a couple of years after I'd done my like first 70.3. I was like, okay, I'm gonna like train and like try and do a race a year, and like that's like my big race training focus. So when 2020 hit and nothing was available, first was a conversation with my coach. Is like, Coach, I'm gonna go insane if I'm sitting at home inside and don't have like, I need workouts to do, or else I'm gonna like absolutely lose it. He's like, well, I'm absolutely gonna lose it if I don't have the opportunity to give people workouts and see how they're progressing and give feedback. So we partnered. We were like basically an entire virtual relationship over Training Peaks. And I was like, it would be crazy because I think I had registered for, I think it was the Iowa 70.3. There was that, it was supposed to be that July, and then obviously didn't happen, or maybe it was Chattanooga. But when that race that I had signed up for got canceled, I was like, it would be crazy if I just did a 70.3 on my own. It's like I could find somewhere I can swim for a mile, and then I can find some roads to do it, bike around it, and then I could run in. So we kind of looked at some spots, and I decided like going back to where I had done my first 70.3, and Benton Harbor, Michigan was like the right spot to do it. I was like, well, I've swam in this lake before. I'll bike the same. I got the Garmin route map for the GPS. I was like, I'll do the same bike course and I'll run around. And it might be a little squirrelier because the roads won't be closed off, but it's like, okay, this is like a good thing to go through. So like, again, putting in the training, very weird and eerie because there's a time where like you couldn't even, people that aren't familiar with Chicago has this absolutely gorgeous, absolutely incredible like trail that is like right on Lake Michigan, takes you all the way up to Evanston, all the way down. Basically you can ride it essentially into Indiana. But like there's a point where that was closed. Like they were letting people on that. So it's like riding through like the south side of Chicago. Very odd neighborhoods. It's just like empty, and it was very weird. But trained all summer. I think we had picked a target weekend to do the race in. So, like I had treated other races, like, all right, pack up the car, go drive over, do the thing.
But this was just you.
This was just me and my 3-year-old daughter and my wife. And then we wake up, and then it's weather sucks. Like, it was not. I think we did it in late September, early October. So like, banking on the weather being okay, but like the weather was awful. Like rolling gray clouds, the waves are just going over, and I'm standing in the parking lot, and like it's the same parking lot where like the finish line was 3 years ago. And I'm just like, and I was like, okay, I've got the open water stuff. I got the buoy. I've got like the neoprene hats and gloves and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just standing there going, I don't know if I can do this.
Okay.
Like, I don't like, there was like this actual, and like, I feel like you've had pre-race jitters before, right? I think everyone, or like, and everyone that's like had some sort of big important meeting, presentation, like, and like whatever it is. I think everyone gets that like pre-race jitters, but like this was like, it was different. I've had those too, but like this was definitely different. I was like, is this actually like, and this has been something I've been training for the entire year. I was like, am I going to do this? Not am I going to do this right now, but like, can I do this right now?
Mm-hmm.
Which is I think a very important distinction.
Can we pause at that point, Miles? So I'm curious. You said you're already like suited up. You're looking out. You see the clouds. You see the waves and white caps. It almost sounds like.
Oh yeah.
Like if you're a windsurfer, like that would be perfect. But as someone who's just kind of like body in the water, probably not the greatest. I imagine like almost probably worse than like the basin at the Charles, on a blustery day. So like, was that purely as your assessment of it? And maybe how you experienced it? Was it purely like cognitive in your head? Were you like, I'm making an estimation, I don't know? Was there a physiological, like, you felt it in your body, something telling you? Was it an emotion?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was honestly all three of those things.
Okay.
Like there was definitely like this cognitive thing going back in my head. I'm like, is this legitimately safe for me to swim in?
Sure.
Right? Because it's not a sunny day at the beach where like there's other families around. Like there's, I don't know, one person walked her dog somewhere near us. And like that was it. That was the only other person on the beach. And again, love my wife, trust my wife. My wife's amazing. She's not really a lifeguard, right? Like she's not like trained in open water swimming. And even though I've got I swim in Lake Michigan, and other places where I want to ensure I'm like safe. Like I've always got like that inflatable buoy attached to my waist. So folks can see me, and so I have something to hold on to if I like overexert myself, go out of my comfort zone. But like I'm saying, I was like, what? Like there's a lot of like there's a cognitive like what if like is this actually safe? Like what if something goes wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Like who is here to actually save me? Like does my wife actually like? I don't think Margie knows the signs of like what a drowning swimmer would look like, right? Sure. So like that's going on in my head right now. There's always like there's the pre-race, pre-nerve jitter stuff, but then there's like I don't know that I want to like. There's this like, I feel like emotionally, I feel things a lot in like my throat, my gut. So like there's this like tense gut. Like I should do this. Like I'm like people give me hard things to do. I'll do hard things, but there's this whole like I don't know if I can do this or I want to do this anymore. And yeah, for someone that like, I've had races go well, I've had races go poorly, but like I've never DNF'd a race until this year, interestingly enough. But I was like, okay, I'm going to try. And so like I did the like running, did the running start into cause I'm on the beach and just the running start into the waves attempt to, cause I was like, oh, I'll like swim out along to, like swim out along the beach back. And I was like, let me just do a loop. So I'm like, again, not too far. Like I'm not swimming half a mile out and then a half a mile back. But like I could not, I don't even know if I got more than like 300 meters into the like from where I started running from the beach into the water. So much less than that actually is swimming. Before I'm like, I can't, like the weight, like again, if you had seen those waves and were trying to take out a Nate, like I don't even think the coach would have like even called us down the boathouse.
Are we
like,
talking
nope,
like half a foot, 1 foot, 2 foot?
They're at least like foot and a half, maybe 2 feet swell. Like, and
to do that, just even
smacking me, and I'm trying to like swim into them. When I'm already like, this is no one else around. I already have like my brain going.
Yep.
And then all this time, like emotionally, I was like, but I have to do this. Like I have to do this. I train and I do hard things and I do races and I've done like, I've gotten in I've swam in choppy water before and it's worked. I've been fine. So it's like this, like I have to do this. I have like this being, less being compelled by, which I think was like my first experience with Ben Harmers. Like, it was like, oh, this anger is like pushing you through. It's like, I have to like, and more trying to convince myself that I could do this. Like there's a lot more mental stuff. So I basically like tried to swim out, realized I really couldn't and really shouldn't. And then came back. I was like, all right, Margie, I guess we're making this a duathlon. I'll do the bike and then I'll do the run. Okay. And she's like, okay, smart choice. Probably good for you.
Had no objections.
No, she's like, it's miserable. You don't have to do this. Like you literally, like again, the whole weekend was like, I wanted to do this, like want, not had to, which we'll keep getting back to. So like, all right, cool. Let me just like take off the wetsuit and practice the transition and then start my watch and go off on a bike. And then it starts raining. And it keeps on raining. And it's not like a nice little like, oh, here's a mist rain, or it's like it's warm enough to you're fine. Like, it's your, like, I'm just I did, like, I thought it was like drizzling too. I just didn't didn't physically prepare myself for any of that. So I'm like in a, your uni suit, lycra, very thin, not very warm, sleeveless top and some bike shorts.
And this was April of 20.
This was like end of September, October. I think it was October.
So cold enough. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I mean, typically I was like, it's October, it'll be fine. But it was on like supposed to like low, like high 50s. It was like low 40s, and then raining. So like I'm biking. It's like, okay, this is miserable. Like this is not, not a race enjoyable time. But it's like, okay, I'm still doing it. And then like I'm like literally fingers getting frozen. Like can't. Like thankfully I have a bike with actual shifters on not on my down tube shifters anymore. But I was like, I can't move my hands to like brake and shift. And, Margie and my daughter Emerson were like, follow me around a couple times. And like, they drive by and honk and wave and be like, yeah, hey, wave, like snap a picture of me. And then I would just go back to like suffering. And like, there was a lot, I don't know. I think it took a lot mentally just to get through that whole loop. It's like, well, I have to do this. I spent this entire year training to do this one very hard thing by myself, and I took my whole family out here and but it keeps raining and it keeps getting colder, and I eventually get back to like that transition area, aka like that parking lot next to the beach, and then pop off the bike, and it's like, all right, I'm gonna go. Like I'm cold. Like I need to go. Like, let me go into the, like, they have a public bathroom there. So, like, let me go inside there and, like, I'll strip off my bike stuff and putting stuff on. And then I think I blocked out most of the memory of, like, that, like, me sitting inside that shit, like, public bathroom. But, like, I had all the bike stuff on. Like, I had the bike stuff off. I had the run gear ready to go. And I was just like, I can't. And like saying it actually myself, like I can't do this. Like I am freezing cold. What the hell am I doing? Like, what am I doing? What am I trying to prove to self? It's not a 70.3. It's not a real race, right? Because it's just me out there. Like, what are we like? What am I doing? So like, I came out and I was like, Margie, I'm just putting let's go find someplace warm. I'm quitting. I'm done.
Yeah.
But like, again, I was so cold that like we had a very long brunch where I consumed many, many cups of coffee, but like 2 hours later, I'm still like, blanket and shit. And I'm like, I'm still like shivering. So probably good that I didn't even attempt to start, because I'm sure there'd been a hypothermic incident happening. And
Sure.
again, love my wife. She's not a nurse. But like that, and I think in the moment, it's like, yeah, okay, it was like really awful conditions. Didn't complete the thing that I wanted to. But that failure, I mean, that was a failure. Like, I failed to complete a race and a big project, and it like that stuck. That was like a 3-month thing that stuck with me for a while. And like, like 2020 was hard, like emotionally, physically, like for society. But like, I was in a deep, dark hole for a while, like for, I mean, probably 3 months, if not longer. Because I was like, okay, so much of my identity is around like, I do the hard thing, I train for the hard thing, and then I do the hard thing. Maybe, like maybe I don't get the exact time that I wanted to, or maybe I don't.
But you accomplish
place as well, like, but I still do the thing.
Yeah.
And to have like, I failed to start and failed to swim, and I failed to even start. I think it was like the failed to start the run was the even hardest thing. I was like, why? What are you doing? Like, if you can't do that, like, this is just working out, right? Like, why?
Sure.
Like, you're like, I don't know. There's a lot of like negative self-talk. It's like, Miles, you are a failure. You failed at this thing. Like, what makes you think that? Like, again, your training went great. Like, you were you trained all summer. Again, had lots of flexible time working from home to squeeze in some more bikes and runs and swims in Lake Michigan. But the fact they put all that work into it and like I did a third of a race I had done before.
Yeah.
As like my big, like, this is the one big thing that like I would train for. As you talked about Head of the Charles, like Head of Charles, like we trained for Head of the Charles. It'd be like, to me, it was like, oh, I trained and like was a good point. Like, had to, we broke an oar, broke a skeg, and like didn't finish the Charles, right?
It's not like the sculls where you all of a sudden your boat gets faster after you lose your stroke seat, right? Like
right. You got to kick out the dead weight.
I mean, but it sounds like it was almost like what happened in senior year in high school, kind of, in a different way, but like you knew you could do it, you had done it before. But I also noticed, Miles, and like I noticed there's a couple of things that you said, right? And I want to maybe circle back. Like, in the bathroom, you said, like, what am I trying to prove to myself? Right. So I'm curious you said like I was in a deep dark hole for like 3 months. And okay, so after being in that hole, did you have an answer to that? Not trying to machine gun questions here, but I want to get them out so I don't forget about them. But then it also sounds like too, as you were swimming and doing the bike, you were in your mind almost like weighing am I going to stop, right? Because I've already put in all this effort to get to this point, right? Like, there was almost like a push and pull or a tension there. And so I'm wondering if that, played a role in your experience. And I think too, I wrote down my last concept, so I'll just toss those. I'll shotgun the questions to you.
Yeah. Sorry. So like, what the last one about like the have to keep going, but I want to stop.
I've already put all this
because I've done like There's a lot of, again, placed on myself by only myself, which I didn't realize at the time. I thought it was like everyone else. I was like, everyone is everyone will know if I don't do this. And everyone will think more poorly of me because I didn't do this thing. So there is this, and then will it continue to judge me accordingly, right? Like, it's like, you can fail, but you're not I can talk about it in a much more healthy way now, but like, you can fail and not be a failure. But those two things were like so interconnectedly, like, that was very much one and the same thing. Like, if I fail, I am a failure. And then I think literally coming to the limits of like a lot of the like formative experiences. Like I can do hard things. People tell me I can't do things, and I go out and do them, and that's a point of pride. It's kind of foundational to somewhat of my identity. And so it's like I was like, no, I got to go do the run, but I can't. I'm I'm literally like shaking to take the bike helmet off of my head and fumbling with a strap and trying to get bike gloves off my claws of fingers. So yeah, there's like a lot. I think like just that, and not ever really being in like having those voices so amplified and like so tangled together. Because you'd be like, you come to the shitty part of the like it's what 3,500, 4,000 meters into a 6K, and you're like, it's really fucking hurts and I'm tired. Like I have to do another 2K after all of this, right? Yeah. And like that's something you're like, okay, you've eventually you figure out how to talk to yourself and like compartmentalize or do whatever with those feelings, emotions to kind of get through it. But like I never been in a spot where like those voices were so loud and so present, and I don't like who is actually like I think too is like that was a moment where it's like who is Miles in this moment?
You question yourself.
Like yeah, right. Like who is the Miles that like I should be like the Miles voices that I should be listening to right now? Which one is going to get me closer to Aristotle Miles? And I was like, I shut down. So I know that was like your second question. And then you had a first one, which I've totally skimmed over and forgotten. But yeah, I can.
Well, I mean, what you were sharing there, though, Miles, it's like it's such a visceral experience, right? It's almost like, is there someone else in the room speaking? Because it sounds like at that time you were so, because of the experience of it and maybe how much you had, I view it as like, I had put this much effort into it, so I want to get this much out of it. And the way I get this much out of it is by finishing. Right. Now I get more out of it if I finish, and maybe it's a PR time, right? Or a personal best. But like, if I finish it, that is like the minimum of what I want out of this. Yeah. So it sounds like there was almost like you were weighing that, and then this other voice there as you came to the realization, I don't think I can do this. That then started, and psychology we'll talk about it as like self-judgment. Yeah. Right? Like you were judging yourself. Maybe you're not even yourself anymore because you did not achieve this minimum standard that you had set. Yeah. It just sounds so deep, and so I could see like if framing it that way, Miles, I could see where like that hole is a really deep hole to climb out of. That's hard.
Yeah. And then again, it was like a foundational, like I train hard for this race, and then I do this race. And because I did that, but I didn't do the race, they're like, that got to a point where they're like that, again, that like self-questioning these voices. I was like, who am I? What do I like? I mean, I continued to, actually, I don't know that I did. I think I like took like some serious time off from like any kind of training. So I was like, what am I doing? What is this doing for me? What am I doing with it? If I can train and have a good training cycle, again, injury free, hitting good numbers, improving times, and not do the thing, like what does that mean? Like right? It was a much more, at that point, it was a much more like results oriented process than a process oriented process. And like that's been I mean, I think maybe like in society, like I think probably like a lot of like society, like what's the end result of like getting here? Like what this podcast, like what do we want the end result of this podcast to be, and like the impact we want to have on dads and people that are in the community. But like I think it's also like, especially since then, a lot of women, it's like it's about the process, it's about the effort, it's about the consistency, not necessarily like because I didn't do, again, crazy ass idea in the middle of a pandemic, no one else is around, I'm going to do an entire 70.3 race by myself.
Yeah.
that's crazy.
That's a lot. It's and I'll say, like, as I'm out, right? I race my single every now and then, and race a double, and it is hard, like especially when you're out on I remember one race in Clermont, I forget, I think it was Lake Clermont or Lake Mineola, maybe one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And our friend Rick also drove up
Yeah.
from Fort Lauderdale with his single, and we're like all excited it was a sprint race, 1,000 meters.
Yeah.
I've been training hard, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And like, he calls me as I'm driving down. It's probably like 6:15. He's like, I'm at the course, and it is awful. I'm like, so when you say awful, Rick, what do you mean? He's like,
yeah,
it's like 17-mile-per-hour winds. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, at that point, I'm like, I could just turn around, go back home, get brunch and do. I'm like, you know what? I'm already here. Let's see what happens. All right. So I drive in. I'm like, it's not too bad on this one section. Then I get to where the actual race course is. I'm like, that's bad. Like,
yeah.
Quads, like women's quads were scratching their entries. And so like, there's in South Florida, mid Florida, North Florida, there's a pretty consistent group of masters men who are like awesome at the single. And we will text and communicate with each other every now and then, just to be like, hey, are you doing this race? Or will I see you here? I got my bid to the Charles, here's when I race. And so I kind of link up with a couple of the guys that I know, and I'm like, so are you doing this? And they're like, yeah, why wouldn't we? Like,
yeah,
well, because it's like, white capping and windy. And they're like, yeah, so they all get out there, and I get out, right? And I see some other guys who are like barely in their boats, and they turn around and head back in. Right. And I'm like, I kind of want to do that. Right.
Yeah.
Like, that guy just did it. Like, I kind of want to go back in too. Cause I'm thinking like, there's enough people around. I don't think there's going to be an alligator that just like comes up like, here's lunch. But like, do I want to face being that dude who fell out of his boat, and now the launch, the coaching or the safety launch has to come up and get me and then pull me back to the dock, right? Do I want to be that guy that everyone sees and like, oh my God, how could he? Why would he make that decision, right? Like we all knew it was crappy out that day. And but then, the other side of my thinking, I'm like, well, I'm already here. Worst case scenario is like, yeah, I tip, but I've never tipped before, and so there's this like mental wrangling that you go through, and just trying to like figure out, like for me, it was an assessment, and eventually I decided I'm going to do it. And there's my story of my 8-minute 1K, which
that's slow for those of you.
So if anyone who's going to be listening, like usually in a single, like 4 minutes, 10 seconds would be acceptable. Like, really any finish is acceptable. But the one dude who I we text to this day, he's like, yeah, we were talking another race, and he's like, did you know I finished first on that one? I'm like, no. He's like, yeah, I had no problems throwing in that. I'm like, oh, golly.
Yeah. Well, you said something actually like really interesting about like, do I want to be that guy who like flips a single and then gets pulled in, and like everyone is looking at you, right? And I think like that, again, internal monologue, especially for like dudes, right? Like there's that like, maybe I can fail. You're like, okay, like Miles failed on like one of his intervals this morning. Who's gonna know? My wife knew I went downstairs and sweated and made noises for an hour and then came back upstairs. But like there's another like procedure, like, is it okay to fail around other people? Is it okay to fail in public? And I feel like there's whether we think like probably more acceptable than we think, broad statement, probably not true of everyone, than we think it is. And we get into this trap where we're like, oh, I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to, like, I don't want to fail and then be seen as a failure.
Yeah.
And then you almost like close yourself off to those opportunities. So I think like it's interesting you brought it up as like the public perception. And I think too is like, I told my self-supported 70.3, like I told all the people at work I was doing, like, that's what I'm training for. And they're like, oh wow, you're crazy. Great. I like loved it. And And I think somewhere in that too is like some dialogue is like, I'm gonna have to go into work. I'm gonna have to go talk to people on Monday that I work with and explain that, oh, I didn't do this. And like I don't want to be like, oh, it was cold and rainy, you didn't do a thing you've done before. Why didn't like yeah, I think that like failing in public or perceived failing in public is like a real thing that I don't know, it's probably more of a molehill that you make out to be a much larger mountain. Especially in like a community that you like, the guys, you see people in a similar, like a very similar races around the time. So, I think that's definitely, I think, part of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think like the piece of, this other guy that he was like, oh yeah, I kind of had no problem. Like I must do really, and I think his words were, I must do really well rowing in rough water. And I'm like, okay, that's lucky for you because I don't.
Nice.
Yeah, like and it makes me think about the first time. Must have been 2009. I think it was Chicago Sprints. So Lincoln Park Boat Club will host, Chicago Sprints. It's a Henley style, so like drag racing down the lagoon. That's right next to Lakeshore Drive and Lake Michigan, right in the heart of Chicago. And I put in to race a single, and I remember like I was competent, right? Like I've been rowing the single.
You're a much better sculler than I will ever be. I will say that.
Well, but like I remember distinctly that night laying awake, right? Like for hours, just thinking like, oh man, I really just, what if I don't finish as fast or as quickly as I would like to get the splits that I want or keep the rate up? Or like, what if, if I flip everyone, and what people will do for that race is they'll kind of line the sides of the lagoon and watch, and every single movement can be seen. This is not like rowing is not a hidden sport. It's not a very good spectator sport unless you're at the beginning or the end of the race.
Sprints is a great spectator sport, but that's
right. Right? Yeah. But like every other race, everyone is kind of like hundreds of meters away from you, as opposed to maybe 20 meters away from you, where they could literally see what, like the logo on your shirt. They're that close.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm laying there thinking like, oh man, if I flip, everyone's going to see it. And like, how am I going to get back on my boat? And, kind of one part of me like wishing, oh man, if there could just be a thunderstorm, right? Then I wouldn't have to race and I could just do the double because I know I'll be okay in the double. All right. But like, I think there is this piece that, Miles, I really connect with that you were saying there is like the worry or the fear or the concern of what the other is going to think or say, that judgment that then leads to self-judgment, right? I wasn't coming in that moment. Like I wasn't saying to myself, I'm an incompetent sculler.
Yeah.
I was thinking, well, now that I think other people might think that, what other negative possibilities could happen? And I kind of hear you saying a little bit of that. Like it opened the door to you saying, you know what? I don't know who am I? Right. Like, here's my identity. I'm a competent triathlete and can accomplish all of this. But if I can't do that, if other people are going to say this about me, at least I think they might say this about me, it's so hard to get through because it's so loud.
Right. And it's like this is the 100%. It's like this weird prism of like your kind of own negative self-doubts. And then again, future, like a lot of what I work, like I talk about with my therapist and our session, like, cognitive distortions, like this cognitive distortion that like these people have this perception. So the negative thought goes through that and then comes back down to you. And it's like amplified 10, 20, 30 folds. And again, I think like, I operate sometimes on a lot of instinct. I'm like, you think your thoughts, like your thoughts happens. And sometimes you think your thoughts. If you don't know you're thinking them, it is very easy for you to get caught in that spiral. It's like, I'm very good at rowing, but I want a rainstorm to come so I don't have to deal with this because people will think I'm a total loon, even though you're like you're future stepping like 7 steps ahead of where you actually are.
I funnily enough, I beat he was a UW Madison the dev camp, the development camp.
Oh, yeah.
Guys. And like I beat him, and he's like, "Oh man, that was like you were off on the start and like just ahead of me the whole time." And I was like, "Yeah." And then if you remember Lev, he's like,
"Yeah,
that was a good race, but you didn't make it to the next. You didn't get out of the heat." I was like, "Oh, why not?" He's like, "Well, I could see you kind of stop pushing after you were ahead." And I was like, "Yeah, that's true. I did." And
yeah,
it's just, it's one of those you can always look back and say, "Well, next time I'll do it differently."
Mm-hmm.
But Miles, I appreciate that you're so open about your experience with this, because it is like I remember like how many thousand people go to Head of the Charles, right? How many thousand people race, right? As we were lining up, I think in 2013, like in our, I think maybe, or 2014, last time we rode the 4 together. And we're not all standing there like, worry, like expressing, okay, if I lose my grip on my oar, what's good? Like, we're not talking about that yet. Chances are us and everyone else is thinking, okay, a lot of like what ifs, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope someday to be able to talk to like some guy at the Olympic level of this, to be, or somebody at the Olympic level to be like, do you worry about that? Right. But like, we're all thinking pretty similar things, but we're not talking about that. Right.
Yeah.
And if you look, we know by physiology and the way our nervous system works, that when people start to get nervous, they have some gastrointestinal stuff. You have to urinate a lot, and like, just go to any 5K, right? And look at the number of people using the Porta Johns numerous times.
My God. Right? Yep.
And, for me, I'd be like, yeah, it's like just a little bit over 3 miles. That's like, like, and I hear you saying like, it's a workout. I work out all the time. I can work out. And like, that piqued my interest because, you're viewing it as just another workout, as opposed to like, this may be the race. This may be the triathlon that sets me apart from, the people who are just running it versus actually racing it.
Yeah. No, and
I was curious how you got to that point.
Yeah. And that's, that's been a while too. Cause like, I think, so I've been fortunate to, I've raced in the 70.3 World Championships now twice. So I just came back from the World Championships in Taupo, New Zealand. And then I raced at St. George, Utah in 2022. So I'm pretty good. I don't like to talk about pat myself on the back, but like I'm pretty good. And like those are the races you want to peak for, and be it you're you can register and do a 70.3. And again, like I genuinely believe this. And if anyone needs help and tips on how to get there, like you can do a 70.3, you can do a marathon, you can do an Ironman. But yeah, when you get to like that level, it's again like that big race that you're racing to, that like that, especially when you're not talking about it, right? When you're not like sharing that. And that's why I think like I was really excited to come on this podcast. I think like people need to be talking about it more. It's like you're not talking about that, your emotions and those fear failures. Like it's just gonna keep bouncing around that prism, bouncing around inside in your head, and it's not. I don't know. Maybe you'll get a little bit of juice off of that start line, and but then you overcook yourself in like 500 meters into a 1900 meter swim. And it's just not good for you. So I think like that, like, I'm trying to answer your first question by like transitioning and like where rowing brought me to triathlon. But like, I think of those times, you, me, Sebastian, and Josh, all standing around, like we're waiting to put hands on the boat and like bring the boat down from the racks into the water and then do our warm up on the way down. I think of a lot of, at least when I was rowing, like a lot of that is like, I don't want to fail because I don't want to let down these other guys in the boat. Like, I don't want to be the one to fail, because then that's that's just not me failing, but that's me failing this entire community, this entire boat of brothers that I've sweat and bled and, went head to head with. And like, that's what I love and still love about rowing is like, it is such the sum of the parts is much greater. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? Like you're contributing to something. So like, I think a lot of that, and that moment to like, I don't want to fail for me, and I also don't want to fail for the guys around me. Triathlon is harder than that because like it's me, right? Like my family helps me by letting me train when I need to train, traveling around, and being okay with me disappearing for 2 hours on a Wednesday night and I'm in my pain cave in the basement versus talking to my wife. But it's a lot more. It's all just me and on down to me, and I think like when the thing I don't think I really came to terms with until like probably like the last 2 or 3 years was like how even in that like isolating triathlon, it's me, I gotta swim, I gotta bike, I gotta run, how much you still rely on like all the people around you. Like you need, like I have an incredible like person that takes care of my bikes because I know I don't know everything, and I like I know I need the help and I accept the help. Like I need someone to help write training plans and help me figure out like how we're going to bridge fitness here to fitness there and fix the things with the mechanics. And but yeah, I think like the fear of failing for yourself, all this is more acceptable because you're like, oh, it's just me, it doesn't impact me. But when you start thinking about it as like failing others, it gets like super overwhelming. And I think too, like, getting more comfortable with failure is like by talking about it and like normalizing it a little bit. And like I think we've been talking for like over an hour and like haven't really talked about like failure and the concept of like being a dad and parenting and all that.
But that's a question that somebody had was, has your experience as a triathlete like impacted any other areas of your life? Right. And I think that's what you're getting to. So
I mean, and but yeah, I think it's like being more getting in love with like the process, not like the end result. Like I am not a failure because I did not hit my target time in New Zealand this December. But I think it's like also how do I, again, triathlon's like kind of isolating. But like how do I share the stuff that I've learned, like especially with my daughter. So she's basically been as old as like my this phase of my endurance athlete career. And like, I don't know, we talk about failure like a good amount of time. Like she is very much like me in some ways. And part of that is like wanting to do everything like super well. And so she will get super, super frustrated when it doesn't go perfect. It doesn't go the way she wants it to. Like Aristotle Emerson like ideal of what the thing she's trying to do does. And so like we'll have conversations. Like she's like, she's a kid, she's figuring it out. She'll be like really frustrated or like really emotional. And she's like, well, I've done it 5, 6, 7 times. It's like, it may take you 8 times. It may take you 10 times. Like, but like, as you're doing this, like, this is what I tell her and then try to bring it myself. Cause like, it's hard. I have 30 plus years of mental conditioning. She's got 8. I was like, are you learning something? Like, are you trying something a little differently? Are you understanding why it isn't going well? And like, what are you doing to change that? And so I think like that, like, let's like figure out how we can tweak the things. Like, are you going to like nail everything? No. Part of like I don't know, perspective on life is like, you can't and you shouldn't expect to. Cause like, if you do that, then like, what's after that? Right. Like if I have, I don't know, best case scenario, like I smash my time PR and I get like PR and win world championship like one day, like very like pipe dream that I'm not anywhere close to. Right. But like if I do that, I still wake up and I wake up the next day. What's next? Like, will I just be like, okay, I did the big, meaty, hairy, scary thing and I did it. So I should just like not do anything else. Like, and like, I will try to get there. I'll do my best to get there. But I think bridging earlier miles, like if it like 18-year-old that failed at the thing he did before, right before he school senior graduation time, and now is like he was shook. 20 miles was shook because I failed at the thing. And I think now I'm like, okay, I didn't do the thing. What can we get better at? Like, what is like the one, like, what is like 1 or 2 things that I can learn about that and do a little bit differently? Okay. Maybe I should put on a waterproof rain jacket before going and biking for 2.5 hours. that should, that might be something you want to think about. Like,
Yeah.
maybe we should have, like, right? Like, is there, like, should I have done more, like, cold weather training? Should I, like, figure out something else? Like, and let's work on those, like, little things. Because, again, I think anyone can do anything. I said that earlier.
Yeah.
But if you got, like, kind of, like, if you know those little things that you're working at and you can fix one or two, and again, you work focus here, bike gets a little better, swim gets a little worse, run gets a little better, bike gets a little worse.
Yeah.
Like, there's all these things that you have to be balancing, and I don't think you ever know. But it's like that process of, like, working through it, I think, is a lot more rewarding than being like, here's a single fixed point, and if I get there, great. If I don't get there, it doesn't mean I'm a failure. But even if I do get there, like, it's got to be something else, right?
Yeah.
So I think thinking about that, like, especially, like, teaching our, the next generation, of like, okay, try something. Got to try hard at it. Like, that's what I tell my daughter when she's like, are you trying? Like, are you really, like, focused, locked in, paying attention, thinking, noting, like, and you need to take a break. Like, take a break. I get it. But, like, are you, like, in that process and having that conversation with yourself to get to doing the thing you want to do better than you're doing it now? And better doesn't mean perfect.
It sounds like asking her to be are you being intentional? Are you being present in what you're doing? And I think you said the, like, getting to love the process, not the end result. And I think I think it's a really powerful message because, you kind of started off by saying, Miles, like, growing up for you, it was like, if you got a 93 or 92, your parents were saying, hey, where'd that other 8% go?
Yeah.
Right. And, like, why didn't you? And I don't think that's let's frame it more positively. I think that is very similar to a lot of the ways that, I don't want to get into, like, cohort, but, like, millennial kids, doing well in school is important. We all needed to go to college. We all need, like, so that was one metric by which we could all be assessed somewhat in a uniform standard, right?
Yeah.
But, like, that does not lend itself well to loving the process, because the end result may not be an A, even though you might really, like, get a lot from the process. I remember my college level statistics courses. I didn't get A's, right?
Yeah.
Like, I will openly admit that to anyone I work with, like, family, whatever. And if Ashley was on here, she would probably at this point say, yes, I used to have to teach you how to do the tips, because, I would always struggle, like, whatever. I figured it out now and can do mental math. But I like statistics because it makes sense to have a nice end result. Oh, let's learn how to do ANOVAs by hand. Awful experience, but, I can do it.
Yeah.
Get to grad school, I got A's in all my stats courses because, well, I had learned how to actually enjoy, like, learn to enjoy the understanding, right, of how statistics work, and, like, what it could be.
Yeah.
And so it turned something that was like, numbers suck, into, hey, this is how it all fits together.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit of what you're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. Like, again, like, you work, like, you had to, because you sucked at it, like, focus a lot of your time and intentionality and effort working on this part of it. And now it, like, because you spent your time there, you will probably understand, like, the core of it better, as well as how to work in it. And I think a lot of that is just true in life too. Like, okay, if you're going to spend a lot of time working on, like, not just spend time with, because, like, if that was the case, like, we'd all be really good, like, multitaskers and Netflix watchers and phone scrollers. But, like, if you're intentional, like, very intentional, like, okay, I need to, like, I'm not the best swimmer. I could not fall out of a boat and survive. And now I'm at a level where, I don't know, I still get passed by a ton of people in every single race, every single swim leg of every triathlon I do. But, because I've spent time working on it, it's like, okay, what does it feel like when I'm moving the water? What do my legs need to be doing? What is, like, again, much like rowing, it's like a full, like, what is my body, all the parts of my body doing all at the same time? It's gotten better. I don't suck as much as swimming. And I think that, like, again, talking about these things, working on these things, having time to reflect on those things. I think that's also been probably the biggest, one of the bigger like factors to like my improvement as a triathlete over the last 6 years. I've been working with my coaches. Like, I don't talk to, like, I see him a couple times a year at races, maybe. A lot of it is like, I will write workout notes. He will respond to workout notes. Sure. And so there's a lot of like, before I write down the thing to answer his question or just like proactively, I have to think about it and like put it into words. So there's a lot more, okay, I'm handling these intervals type well, but like, this is where I think I'm fading off, or like these workouts seem to be working better because I think I'm seeing this impact in the training that I'm doing. But because again, I have had to be more intentional about that, I'm like a lot more aware of it and able to, again, have a language to talk about it, communicate with it, and I think ultimately just be better at it. Just like you want statistics.
Yeah, and this is my language. I'm trying to describe your experience with, but like it sounds like you are relating to it all differently. Like it's not before, right? In high school, you gave that example, right? Like this was supposed to be the win, and I failed because I didn't win. But now you're looking at this. Okay, these are all the different components. I can see them and make sense of them. But if this didn't work out so well, you're not relating to it as like, oh, all of a sudden I am not sufficient or I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Rather, Miles, it sounds like you are relating to it as like, okay, this is something that I have some power to change or I can do something about. Right. And that I did write that down like back in 2020 with the swim component. Like I did hear you talking about like, I can't do this. And, like as though, right. And I was thinking like, as though you could control the weather, Miles, like the external, like, so if you removed the weather as a component there, would you have finished it? Like, what do you think?
Probably. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
I mean, actually, who the hell knows, right? Like we're playing Monday morning quarterback. Like who's to say like the swim went perfectly, still rained. And then, I don't know. Like I wasn't paid. Like I was tired because I wasn't like you're drained a little bit coming off the bike. I hit a pothole and get a flat tire, or I get through the bike and then I roll my ankle on like some sort of slippery stretch of like pavement. Like there's a million like what if. So like, part of me says like, oh yeah, like I could go there, right? And be like, oh, the weather was the thing that could hold me back, but A, can't control it, not productive. B, like that's not necessarily, again, I think to the point you're getting at, like that's not something I can truly control and take from it. What I can control is like, the controllables, right? Is like, all right, I can control the equipment I have, the way I prepare my body, the way I'm prepared. Like, okay, I should be prepared for like alternate perfect day weather conditions. And like, what is the backup plan? What is the backup plan if that doesn't work out? But yeah, a lot of that is like, they're like thinking about and being in the like, that process of, understanding what you can control and tweak and change. Cause there's things you can, and there's things like that's, what was it? Francis Assisi's prayer, like wisdom to know the difference between things you can change and not. I think being intentional about that and like truly like intentional, like what can I actually do?
I think it's powerful to think about it that way, but in the moment, right? And that's where I think the more I look into, the more we kind of dig into failure, it's almost the emotional component that blocks us from being able to objectively see certain important aspects of whatever happened, right? And that emotion part, right, I think is so powerful. Like you said, it was very deep and kept you in a very deep place there. But I think, once it sounds like you started to relate to that differently. And that was really, it sounds like really powerful for you and something that you've integrated and kind of put into play, like in other aspects of your life too. And it's such a cool story to hear. I think, it's one of those pieces like a lot of the patients that I work with, right? Like I will preface things by saying, it's easy for me to say this, to put it into practice is so difficult though. Right. And so like, it's easy for me from where we sit right now to look and say, yeah, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking, to say, this is what I can do with it. But in that moment, it's so difficult. But if you're never in that moment, then you never get to the place you are now.
Yeah. And if you're never like present enough to like at least understand the moment for what it is while it is happening, which again, it is tricky. It takes some time. It is hard to be able to have that space to reflect and actually move on with things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end in a little bit, but I may ask you to come back on another time.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more we can talk about. But so part of the whole idea for this podcast is to ask everyone that I interview with a couple of questions so we can kind of get a qualitative research study going.
It's a step big on that, doctor.
Yeah, well, luckily I did statistics, you know, how do we do qualitative research? So one, you know, I got two questions, right? One, define failure. How do you define it?
Failure is not doing the thing you set out to do.
Okay. Anything else to add to that, or is it?
I think it's that I think is like a flat, emotionless, valueless. Like failure is not bad. Failure is good. Like I would not have met my wife if I was not competitively rowing at U Chicago. Wouldn't have met you if I wasn't competitively rowing either, right? I would not have had this perspective on life, being a dad, being okay with failure in the process. Like if I didn't fail at that 78.3.
Yeah.
I would not have the language to talk to my, very smart, precocious, motivated, internally driven, motivated daughter about failure. And now it's okay if I didn't have that. So, fail again. You're not failing. You're not trying is the like very bro locker room talk. But like, again, like if you're not failing, you're not pushing, you're not going to the limits of what you can be, even if and whether you know where your limits are or not. So, failure is good. It teaches us stuff more than success does.
Yeah. It sounds like you see failure as sort of a inverse of a verb. It's a non-action, right? Or so you said like failure is not doing the thing that you set out to do. So non-action in when you intend to act.
Yeah. I mean, it is less of an endpoint and more of a stepping stone. What you do with that failure is entirely up to you. I keep coming back to your question. Like someone's like, how do you overcome obstacles? Or like, what do you like? You got big whatever in your way. I don't know. They still have obstacles, whether it's triathlon training, my daughter's, it's things that I anticipate my daughter having to go through, work things. And it's like, okay, they're not going to go away because I don't think about them. I have to do something. So like, what am I doing? And what's like the smallest step that I can get momentum, start rolling downhill. And then maybe that obstacle isn't as big as I thought it was.
Sure. I think I appreciate that you say that, Miles, because I think that's helpful for people to hear, right? Especially if you're going through, if you have like just failed at something and let's say you're stuck in that hole, to hear someone who's been there be able to say, once you get some distance from it and you keep working at this, or you keep addressing it, or you keep trying to, like, I'll use the term ameliorate, but to make it better, to learn from, then what that hang up was, or what that failure was, used to be felt like this, but now it becomes more like that because there's all this other stuff that is also important. So I think that's really powerful, and I appreciate that a lot. Okay, next question for you. If you had to pick a color, what color is failure?
Chartreuse.
Chartreuse. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So like that weird yellow, green, nausea, vomit inducing.
I
Like
was
it's
thinking
just
like baby food,
oh yeah, like a little the dot, like the baby food Gerber peas
Yeah.
and that
Peas
like
and
just like
carrots and yams or something.
you're like this just doesn't like it doesn't like I think 10 years ago I would be like it's a black hole. Like it's just like it's the end point. But I was like, this is uncomfortable. Failure sucks. Don't get me right. I don't like sitting here and admitting to you, it's like, yeah, I failed at all these races, and I failed at I failed this morning at the workout I was supposed to do. I did not complete it to 100% as RX. But the more you talk about it, the more comfortable. And again, like the more times you do that uncomfortable thing, the less uncomfortable it will be.
Yeah.
But it's always failure is always. I'm always just gonna look at it like it's this gross. I don't like it. Right? No one likes.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
like,
is there like a feeling that comes with that? Because you look at some baby foods, right? Chartreuse color, and you're like, is it queasiness, right? You feel icky.
There's this like, I mean, you're seeing it in my face, right? It's just like, ugh, like I don't like you're kind of you're bracing. That's actually probably a good way to think about it. Like you're bracing for the potential impact of something worse coming behind the failure. And that's not always there. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, failure. I failed.
Yeah.
Right? Like to your like, oh, I might flip and therefore people that see me flip will think I'm not a good rower, right? You're like, okay, like I flipped. Like that is the factual thing that happened.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to think the thoughts. The thoughts are gonna come. Like again, I know that can be really hard.
Point.
Like
Yeah.
I've been like people out there, like I have been in some really shitty, really dark periods of my life for really, really long time. And it can seem like there's nowhere, but nothing is forever. Except maybe taxes. Taxes might be ever, but like nothing is forever. You all like, as long as the sun will rise, you will wake up and there's another chance to do something. Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 0.0001% better or different. But you do keep doing that every single day. That process, that gets you somewhere.
Yeah. I think that's a really good message and I hope anyone who listens to this can hear that, Miles, because you've been through it. You've been to the abyss. You've come back from that and you relate to it differently now and to be able to hear that it is something that even in the moment it sucks so bad, even just a small percentage change, you can still do that and that will make a difference for you.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's so powerful to hear. So I appreciate, Miles, just the vulnerability and the openness and the candor of it all that you brought today. And yeah, definitely want to keep talking with you about these things.
Yeah.
We'll just kind of keep this conversation going. But I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, no, this has been incredible. I am happy to come on and chat. And anyone listen to me, I think Alex is going to drop it in probably the show notes. But Miles B 2009 on Instagram. My DMs are open. You want to talk triathlon training?
On the website.
You want to talk to me about dad stuff? I can talk about dad stuff. You want to you want to talk about the failure that is Chicago Cubs baseball these days? We can talk about that too.
It used to be the Brewers, but now I'm glad it's the Cubs.
We should not talk NL Central baseball. I like you too much for that.
There we go.
But yeah, I think again, the more we talk, thank you for this opportunity. I love the concept and being to be on here and share my story. Because again, the more we talk about failure, the more we talk about how we feel and think about it and how it can come up and affect our lives, the more I think we're just gonna find everyone goes through this and it's okay. And it's not easy, but it is normal. And you can get through that gross chartreuse baby food color and come through on the other side, not just see it as here's the end point of the everything I've been working for since I was 12 years old.
That's a powerful message, Miles.